educated with money. He's well dressed, not funny, and not much to say in most conversations, but he'll put the bill in all situations.
Hey boys and girls, we're back for another edition of Education is Fast. We're on our 7th lesson on Unit 2 and our 12th of the school year. We're going to basically get started like we always do, and we're going to get started with the learning targets. We got 5 for you today, and unless you're new, you know what the learning targets contain. They're all the things I want you to be able to do as a result of this lesson. These should be the goals that you're working towards throughout the video. Getting into them, explain how price is determined, describe what equilibrium price is, and identify it while viewing a supply and demand curve or a schedule. Describe what the equilibrium is and identify it while viewing a supply and demand curve or schedule. Describe and calculate a shortage and a surplus. Also going to have to be able to figure out what a shortage and a surplus is, obviously. Determine the equilibrium price and market equilibrium while viewing a supply and demand curve both before and after a factor of supply or demand has occurred. So when we were talking about our lessons on factors that can change demand and supply, that's where this starts to come back. And if you could do it before, you can do it now, no problems. All right, we're going to actually have the first 4 coming at you right off the bat, and seeing how there's only 5, we know that we're going to have a lot of content coming our way. Hopefully you can keep up. And if not, the beauty of YouTube and video, obviously, is that you can rewind the portions you need to hear again. So, little preview though, we have already examined how a demand curve and schedule illustrates how much of something a consumer is willing to buy at each price, and that each supply and curve schedule is how much a producer is willing to make at each price when we're talking about supply. And now we are going to look at how those two come together and help determine the price of that good or service. How much is it going to sell for you? We've not actually talked about how much something will be priced at. We've just kind of said, well, here's how much everybody's willing to buy at each price, and here's how much that people are willing to make at each price. But we never actually put the two together, and that's what today is all about. All right, so some concepts you need to know. You would have heard some of them when we were doing our learning targets. It's a market equilibrium, and that's the situation in which the quantity demanded for a good or product equals the quantity supplied. An equilibrium price is the price at which consumers are willing to pay equals the price which producers are willing to sell it. Now, you can easily figure out what the two of those are when you end up looking at a schedule. So, we've seen demand schedules and supply schedules up to this point, but this would be the first time we have seen both of them at the same time. We can clearly see that the law of demand is in place, as well as the law of supply. You need to be able to examine both the supply schedule and the demand schedule for a product in order to determine the market equilibrium and the equilibrium price. In this case, we can clearly see that the market equilibrium price is $6, because this is where the quantity supplied equals the quantity demanded. If I were to sell the good at $8, I would have a surplus of 20, and a surplus means you have an extra of a good that you cannot get rid of. If I were to sell it at $4, I would have a shortage of 20 because I only made 15, but people want to buy 35 of it. And a shortage basically means that you don't have enough supply of something. Now, I use the same information from the schedule we just saw to create the supply and demand curve. The way that we determine where the equilibrium price and market equilibrium are just takes a little bit of work. Where the supply and demand curve meet is what we will use to determine both the market equilibrium and the market equilibrium price. So right here, where these two lines intersect, is where we're going to use to actually determine those things. Now, it's only slightly more complex to determine whether there's a shortage and a surplus occur. Anytime we have a shortage, it's because the price is lower than the market equilibrium. So when we examine the graph like this, a shortage will take place at any price that's below the intersection. So anything down here, if I have a price that's below 6, so if it's $5.50, whether it's 50 cents, I'm going to have a shortage. Okay? And a surplus occurs when a price is higher than the market equilibrium price. So when we examine this same graph, it would be any point that's above the intersection. I'll walk you through how to calculate the shortage and surplus using a graph as well. So let's do that here, just kind of recapping too, because I didn't actually show it. So anything up here is going to be a surplus. So let's go ahead. We're going to take $10 right here, and we're going to actually do how to calculate a surplus first. At $10, we know we're going to have a surplus. So first, we got to find where $10 is on our graph. And then we're going to go from left to right, starting at $10. And when we hit our demand curve, we need to take note of the quantity involved. That's going to be 10. So let's take it, let's walk you through it. $10, hit that demand curve, I go straight down. That's a quantity of 10. Then we have to basically go all the way until we hit our supply curve once again. And we're going to go over here and it's going to hit again at 40. So basically what we have is a difference in 30 because we have 10 for our quantity over here at this point, and we've got 40 right here for a quantity at this point. And so that's a difference of 30, and because it's above the market equilibrium price, that means that we are going to basically have a surplus of 30. Now when it comes to doing a shortage, I basically do the same thing. And what's going to happen is I'm going to take a price of 2, and so I find it at 2, I go ahead. The first thing I'm going to hit is a supply curve, and my quantity involved is 10, and I'm going to continue on until I hit my demand curve, which is right here at 40. So that's a difference in 30 again. The only difference, though, between our first exercise and our second exercise is that we're dealing with a shortage in this case. So, you know, if I did it at 4, we'd be doing the same thing. I'd follow along the curve, follow along the price line. I hit right here at about 15. I hit right here at 35. So if I sold it at 4, I'd end up with a shortage of 20. So that's pretty much it. It's not that hard. You know, I get students that they get confused. I think you're thinking too much if you're getting confused on this one. So let's keep going. Our learning target number 5, determine the equilibrium price and market equilibrium while viewing a supply and demand curve both before and after a factor of supply or demand has occurred. Well, what is disequilibrium? We got to get into that. Basically, we need to review this. The two cases in which we discussed equilibrium were, we talked about market equilibrium, the situation in which quantity demanded for a good or product equals the quantity supplied, and then we've got equilibrium price, which is the price at which consumers are willing to pay equals the price at which producers are willing to sell it. That's having a state of equilibrium, but when we have a state of disequilibrium, we have to start all over again and find the point of equilibrium. So, when does it actually occur? You've actually learned about what causes disequilibrium, and you just didn't really know it. Anytime one of the 6 factors that can cause a change in demand or one of the 6 factors that can cause a change in supply kick in, we've got a state of disequilibrium. And here's what it looks like. So right here we've got this is going to be a demand curve, and as we can see with the colored lines here is that this was our original demand curve, and basically we have a new demand curve, and that could be a result of, and who knows, this could be normal goods and we've got an increase in income, this could be an increase in market size, this could be an increase in consumer taste, this could be an increase in consumer expectations. I'm not going through all 6 there, but that's basically the whole gist of the thing is something has occurred that's caused a change in equilibrium. So, with here, you should be able to easily figure out what the original market equilibrium price and the market equilibrium was. We can go ahead and do that now. So we got to find that blue line. So that's going to be right here. Our market equilibrium would have been about 25, and our market equilibrium price would have been 6 for the original. But we have a new one. So all I do is I go, I got to find where this orange line intersects with this gray supply line. And my market equilibrium is going to be 30. And my market equilibrium price is going to be, let's just call it 7. So this is basically what we're going to be doing through the whole thing. Now, we've got some other things to look at, though, too, like what causes a price to fall. So on the graph on the left, we can clearly see that there has been a decrease in demand, meaning that one of our 6 factors that can change demand has actually kicked in. We also see that the market equilibrium price has decreased from $6 to approximately $5, and the market equilibrium, that's the quantity, has also decreased from 25 to approximately 23. With the graph on the right, we can see that the supply has clearly increased. This too causes a decrease in price. The market equilibrium price drops from $6 to $5, and our market equilibrium actually increases from approximately 25 to 30. Now we've got another one here. What's going to cause price to go up? Well, let's take a look at it. In the graph on the left, we can see that demand has increased, and we have a market equilibrium price that started out at 6, and now it's climbed to approximately $7.50. Now, market equilibrium has also increased in this particular graph as well, going from a quantity of approximately 25 to 30. The graph on the right shows a decrease in supply. In this case, we can see that the market equilibrium price has changed from $6 to about $7.50, and our market equilibrium has decreased in this case, going from a quantity of 25 to 20. Can you believe it? We're already done. Let's take a moment, read over the targets we established at the beginning of the lesson, maybe even pause the video and do a mental checklist on which ones you can do. Obviously, the ones you can't should basically scroll back and check out again. That's going to wrap it up for us here at Education is Fashionable. There's just 2 lessons left in our unit on supply, demand, and pricing. Look for those to come out in the next few days. Until next time, this is Mr. Norton reminding you that education is always fashionable.